Do you want to do the, go ahead, do the intro, Paul.
All right. Well, welcome to the Thinker Growth Workshop, Thinker Ventures, thinkergrowth.com. Join the community. I'm joined here today by uh, our fearless host, Jason Todd, who is being piped in from a secure location in another dimension. So he's going to sound like he's on the telephone. He's actually here with us, but there's been technical issues. So that's the ruse we're rolling with. We've also got Ryan joining us, fresh back from overseas journeys, and a brand new voice on the workshop is TC Bell, joining us from. Where are you joining us from, TC? Where's home?
Rockford, Illinois. I'm actually in this dimension.
That's right. You're in Jason's world. All right. That's right. I forget you guys know each other locally, so that's awesome. Well, and today we are going to talk about travel, which is maybe a surprising topic. It's quite common for entrepreneurs these days to talk about traveling. If you're a digital nomad and you can take your business on the road, if you can go to a secure location, there's the whole stereotype on Instagram of sitting on the beach front on top of your Ferrari, sipping a couple of mimosas while you work from your laptop. And of course, we all know that that's fairly bogus, but it sells. And so, but that's not really what we're going to talk about today. Now we got Naomi joining us here.
A full house.
Yeah, we got a lot of voices on the show today, which is good since we're talking about travel. And Jason, just to kick this off a little bit, from as I thought about it, was you'll hear all sorts of discussions, talk, et cetera, about routines, and routines are great, right? All entrepreneurs should have a routine, a morning routine. You got your routine for this and your routine for that, and we become creatures of routine. I actually think it's good, though, to ask from time to time, in the spirit of travel, what do you do to disrupt your routine? And Ryan, you've probably got a little bit of a story here just from your recent travels. And I've certainly got some experiences of my own, but there we go. What can travel do as a disruption beneficially for the entrepreneur? So who's got some thoughts to kick that one off?
Well, I guess I can start with the trip. I recently went on a 2-week trip, with my girlfriend and my mom, and we traveled from London, Paris, into France, and this town called Dijon, and then Zurich. And I think the trip alone, just getting out of my usual environment, was super helpful. Jason and I were talking, and in perspective, it was literally just kind of getting out of my cave and my hole. Like I had spent months here in my house, just kind of brainstorming, working on things, and for the most part, not really seeing the light of day. So it was really helpful to kind of get out and see the world, and actually really see how people were like interacting, especially outside the United States. It was kind of refreshing, to be honest. But what that ended up doing was really inspiring me in what I was doing, just kind of seeing how people were moving around, what people were doing, what I felt like my target demographic was doing in their everyday lives. And not only that, I mean, I'm kind of bootstrapping my business as well. So there was a saying a phrase that I came up with while I was out there, and it had to do with some some bills and stuff that had came through that I didn't really think about before I went on this trip. And so I got I had a freak out in the moment. And with that came a lot of inspiration for what I was doing. And the phrase that I had brought up to Jason was, with desperation comes inspiration. So that was kind of my trip in a nutshell with regards to like how I thought about my business.
So travel, right? As a disruption, Paul. I think that as entrepreneurs, a lot of times we find ourselves struggling to unplug. I find myself having a hard time being present because I'm always worried about the next step. And I think I can remember I took my family to Myrtle Beach earlier in this year. And I can remember actually being at the beach and working from 8 o'clock to like maybe 2 p.m. because I got trapped inside of a project. And so, so unplugging and travel is two different things, right? And so being present, and being there is two different things. And so, Ryan, I'm interested to ask you, like, while you were there, you said you had something that disrupted your entrepreneurial disruption. And you said it was motivational and, inspirational, right? But, I do think it's from a mental health capacity. I think you need time to think, right? You need time for your brain to really experience the moments that you're in, versus being pulled in two different directions. I have a family, I have 4 children. One is already grown, and I have 3 little ones, including a 2-year-old. I started all the way over again. Right. And, it's very important right now that I'm, when I'm with my 2-year-old, as she's, she's most, she's like a little ball of clay right now. Right. So she can be molded into anything. I just think it's important that as entrepreneurs that we find time to take, be present in that moment, like the moments that we're in. So if we're traveling, let's take away from the business and put those necessary things in place so we can be present.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that, TC. As a matter of fact, my girlfriend was very much super supportive in the sense that she was like, you need to kind of focus on what we're doing right now, like be in the moment with us here. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do with regards to what's happening back at home. There's nothing that can happen now that's going to change whatever outcome is happening back in the States, back in San Francisco. So when I was able to actually like focus on what I was doing and focus on being in the moment, that was really helpful. But I got to say, being an entrepreneur, knowing that you have to kind of deal with things as they come along, it felt kind of good, to be honest, to kind of like be just out of the game for a minute to kind of get that perspective, regardless of how I was feeling about, the current situation at the time. And I was really lucky to have, my girlfriend and my mom with me to kind of help me focus and kind of get out of my head. But yeah, that was kind of my experience. And it was a blast. We had an amazing time. I can talk about all the different locations. But with regards to what we were talking about, I think it was really helpful to help me kind of get more motivated to what I was doing and a little bit more centered with regards to like to accepting the outcomes of different situations.
Side note, Naomi, are you putting together a Rubik's Cube right now?
Sorry. I have
No, don't
hear me?
continue. I'm trying to figure out if that's a Rubik's Cube.
It's a ghost cube. I fidget. It helps me focus.
I like that. Yeah.
I also have my 12-sided and my 6x6.
When I was a kid, we had one that would flip around. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it wasn't a Rubik's. It was some type of puzzle that was. Anyway, I digress. Sorry. Here.
Naomi, what do you say about travel and how it can affect things for an entrepreneur?
First of all, can you guys hear me okay? Is my audio? I don't know
Yes.
what my input is.
I hear you
I
fine.
can hear you.
Okay. So I really love what both of you have been saying about being in the moment. Something that, well, first of all, to answer your question, Paul, I actually wrote down what Ryan said. I need to go back and read it again because I already forgot what it was. Because ADHD. With desperation comes inspiration. That's beautiful. I love that because that was, I think that's something that it can affect an entrepreneur in so many ways, not just travel, not just business wise, but I think whenever there is something that throws you off your game, you have an opportunity to run with it. You have an opportunity to get out of your system because we never know how mundane or old or broken down our system can be until we throw a wrench in. Once we throw a wrench in and we have to run with it, it kind of forces us to grow our brain, to grow the way we think, to think a new way, to go down a new avenue of thinking that we might not have even thought of before, and can bring us a lot more business, a lot more success, a lot more thriving than we could have possibly imagined for ourselves. So there's that aspect of it. But then also what you guys were saying earlier about staying in the moment, I've been diving into not like, I guess, kind of like shadow work, where you kind of like go through and you look at past traumas and how that affects your current mindset. And I've been kind of looking at, like, I have OCD tendencies and how past trauma can affect that. And I've noticed that OCD tendencies make it so I have a harder time being present with my kids. And like, I'm focused on, if we get out the door, I have to check off X, Y, and Z before getting out the door. But what if instead I spend that time with them? What if instead of worrying about what if someone's going to perceive me if I don't have perfectly clean clothes on, my hair perfectly done, my face perfectly, well kept, like everything put together. What if instead of worrying about someone accusing me of not being a good enough mom, what if I be a present mom with my children? What if instead of having that OCD tendency from trauma, worrying, like the nitpicking from past traumas that other people do, what if instead I be present? And I think that, like, when we push through that, like with traveling as an entrepreneur, um, you have this tendency to, you're used to needing to do a certain set of things in order to be successful. There are a certain set of things that you need to focus on in order to bring in that success with your business. And so when you're on vacation, I'm sure the temptation is to, oh, I still need to do those things. Otherwise, you feel like you're lagging. Because we were talking about, was it last week? We were talking about responsibility, or was it 2 weeks ago? The responsibility that's there, it's all on us. As an entrepreneur, it's all on us. So when we're on vacation, it's super important to set those responsibilities aside and take the responsibility of enjoying yourself, taking that off and being in the moment, taking off those things that might be getting in the way of you living in the moment, and stop worrying, like, because self-care is ultimately going to be where your success is going to come from. You have to make sure that you're present and doing it for the right reasons for yourself, and it will help you thrive in your business, in your family, in your head, in like everywhere across the board. So those are my two little bits there.
Jason, this is reminding me of what you wrote in What Could Be. We used to have a chuckle about it. You had a good way of putting it. And the only thing that distinctly comes to mind is where you said, go on a trip when it isn't the right time, cook without a recipe, right? So what is this like? What am I referencing there? It's a subtopic in your book, and you talked about disrupting the flow for the purpose of stimulating that creativity that goes to sleep when we don't have those disruptions.
It recalls to my mind maybe the next book, which is forthcoming, called The Memory Foam Life. We are in our lives. Our lives are built on habits. Habits are unintentional activities that just become part of our life. It is my, chewing of my nail when I was younger. Like, for some reason, it just became a thing. Never thought about it. I'd have to catch myself, like, oh, I'm biting my nail. How did that happen? I don't know. It just started happening. And then it recurred without my thought, without my intention. Routines, we mentioned routines before. Routines are intentionally chosen. They are like a process, like a manufacturing process. Only my routine is when I wake up in the morning, I, make my bed, I brush my teeth, I make my coffee. Those are routines. They're not a habit. Habits are the things we don't even understand that we're doing, which we become conformed to. It's the sort of reciprocal arrangement. We become conformed to the habits, and the habits become conformed to us, like memory foam, where we lay back in there, we sink down into it. And the trouble is that these habits that are built up over time, whether they're positive or negative, we're stuck in them. we're not even thinking about it. And when we want to make positive change, it's like that memory foam. We have to move outside of it. And now it becomes uncomfortable, even for a positive change. And as we sit in that new change, that new circumstance, then we become conformed to that new circumstance. We might develop new habits. But the fact that we don't give intentional thought to these things means that we need to be able to disrupt patterns to allow our subconscious to create new patterns. And that's where I think the idea of going on a trip is very disruptive, because a lot of the habits that are built up circumstantially around us, we're now in new circumstances. It's new people, it's new temperatures, it's new sight lines, new activities, new languages, perhaps, which do have a disruptive, they are by nature disruptive. And then our brain has to put new thought into it. And I think the real value, apart from building new habits, and that's cool and valuable, I think the real value is the recognition that we are living on a planet with almost 8 billion other people. And I, sitting at home in Rockford, Illinois, in the United States, which, let's say it's the greatest, country in the world, is 5%. 5% by population of the entire world. 5%. And I live my life as though it's 95%. But it doesn't take much to fly around the world and find out that my life, the things that I think are the normal, are so far from normal for the vast majority of the rest of the world. And so when we're thinking about bringing a product, service, or a message to market, we're walking like horses with blinders, thinking this is all there is, when in fact we're looking at a fraction of possibility. And it doesn't take long to open your eyes, I think, when you just travel outside of, in this case, the United States. Go to a new country, and I think your eyes are open to possibility.
And this is one of my philosophical points, but this is what it made me think of. Back in the 90s, there was this movie called The Madness of King George. You may have heard of it or seen it. And it's the story of George III, who was king during the American Revolution. But it's set after the revolution has been fought and lost, and he's slowly losing his mind. And one of the reasons he's the doctor that they bring in to treat him, the doctors that they were using are a bunch of, quacks. They bring in this guy who correctly perceives that this is a spiritual problem, not a medicinal one. And there's this fascinating scene where he said, I'm going to butcher how he words it, but he basically says, the king is deteriorating because he has no one stopping him, no one to say no to him, no one to challenge him, no one to stand up to him. Everybody around him is sycophants, right? Yes, Your Majesty. Of course, right away, Your Majesty. Whatever you wish, Your Majesty. So he goes into this role, even though this is the ruler of the world power at the time, of standing up to him and challenging him. And he cures him by stopping all of that unstoppable momentum in one direction, like you're talking about there, Jason. So even if it's not travel, but I think the broader thing here, travel is a great way to experience this, but I think the broader concept that we're actually talking about here is that when we become creatures of routine and habit, which a lot of entrepreneurs do, and to a certain extent, that's a good idea, we become part of a momentum that just keeps going and going and going and never stops, because it collides into something that has the power to stop it dead in its tracks. So whether you do that through travel or whether you do it through something like deliberately deciding to learn a skill or a trade or a hobby or something like that, where you have zero literacy, like you know nothing about it, and it's challenging and it's time consuming and it's frustrating. But what this doctor in the movie understood was that triggers the growth and development of the human brain and the soul that is attached to it, and it causes us to become bigger people in a way, spiritually, of course, right? Our physical body remains the same size, but our ability to navigate and understand and relate to the world around us and all of its infinite varieties becomes bigger. And that's where I think a huge amount of growth as an entrepreneur really takes place.
That was great, Paul. I think, so two things to piggyback on what Jason said is people tend to respond to the container that's around it, right? So we conform to the container that we're in. And I think as people in general, I'm just going to talk as entrepreneurs anyway, right? You're in this small box, like this world of yours. Like Jason said, 5%, which is giving us a lot, but still, right? This is a very small portion of the 8 billion people that are out here. So something someone told me a long time ago is don't take yourself so serious, right? Like you are, you're just as insignificant as everyone else in the world, right? And you're also just as significant as everyone else in the world. And so what I find is when I go out of the country, especially I just got back from Mexico like 4 months ago, and amazing time with my family. I was able to disconnect, but what I really learned, one thing that stuck out to me is that I met a guy that was trying to sell me photos. And this happens to me a lot when I think about it. But the guy said to me that he never bumps into people at this resort that talk to him the way that I did. So I was like asking all sorts of, not just questions about Mexico and Cancun, right? I was asking him questions about his history and his culture and, the things that they believe in, right? And what I found is that we were not so different, him and I. And so, I was saying, don't take yourself so seriously. But then you said, to piggyback on what you said, Paul, you said spiritually. And one of the things that I always talk about is that in the Bible, it says that you should not put new wine in an old skin or it would burst, right? It will surely burst. The reason physically is because, old wine is fermented, it bubbles up and it kind of eats through old skin. But from a spiritual perspective, is that sometimes you have to renew your container, right? You have to think differently, right? You have to give yourself a different container. I'm not even talking about size at this point, because you can have the same size container, but be way more significant than you ever thought you could be. Like someone with a very small container can make a huge ripple effect, And so I think by not taking ourselves so seriously and going out, and someone said expanding, I can't remember who said it, but expanding, our container, we can then in turn grow. We can add new wine to our container, so to speak. So
it stops you from being a one-dimensional being, I think. And you,
why Jason started off the call in an entirely different dimension. Talking into, right?
That's right, from his underground lair in the we could turn this into a Star Trek sort of thing where he's broadcasting from another star system.
So one of the things that sparked my interest in having this discussion, Ryan has been working on a skincare brand and doing social media videos for the skincare brand. And I noticed that when he went to, I think, France, were you in France when you took those videos? Ryan's videos changed pretty dramatically from when he was alone at home to walking through the streets of France. I'm curious, Ryan, what precipitated this change? You're muted. You're muted. Still muted. Thanks for asking. And I was actually going to talk about perspective, but I think this kind of leads into that. And part of the benefit of travel is getting a different perspective on like how other people live, especially in different countries. Um, and I deal in skincare, and a lot of that has to do with my demographics behavior around skincare. So what I noticed when I was traveling is that men's skincare, which is the demographic that I'm working in, was very different in different countries. And considering that I was out and about and walking around with my girlfriend and my mom, I don't think, that being said, I think a lot of the change in my videos was not only where I was, but who I was with. Right. And I'll start with the location, being in France and being in Zurich and different places. I mean, out, it's really easy to get really good B-roll footage, really beautiful shots of different places and walking through places and things like that. So that's what we were focusing on. Um, and having that movement and those different uh, viewpoints were really helpful for my content, simply because, to Jason's point, I've been literally in a cave, like creating videos and content, but not really having a different perspective. So I was, when we were walking around, traveling and seeing the sites where you were shooting B-roll, my girlfriend was like, hold the camera. So I had some help talking to people and stuff like that. And that really changed my content dramatically, which really affected the followers. Like, people really started gravitating towards my content. So a couple things. Part of that, of course, was the location. And the second part that I think was really impactful was who I was with at the time. My girlfriend creates content every day. Like, she's always creating videos for her modeling, her makeup and stuff like that. And I was really resistant to it. And we've been long distance for a while. So when we met up in Europe and stuff like that, we started doing things together. And she actually was the main influence on me changing up like how I created this content. So it was really a marriage of really great timing, or great location, and great people around me. So I've got to say, when you travel and you put yourself in a situation that's outside of the one that you've been working in, it really gives you a perspective to see like how other people live. When we talk about men's skincare specifically, like, it was very different in a place like Zurich, which was really cold, dry. You know, like the Burgundy region of France, which was also really cold and dry, versus being here in San Francisco, where the weather's fairly temperate. Like, it doesn't really affect your skin. It really affected my skin while I was out there. So I was like, oh my goodness, let me talk about this content and like why people actually need this stuff. Because when you're in different places, or if you live in different environments, this may happen to you. So the traveling was really beneficial in so many different ways. It really it took me out of my comfort zone, at least the comfort that I was in at the time, and put me around people that helped me kind of move forward in what I was doing. And I really appreciated that. Again, some of the crises that I kind of went through as well were also learning experiences. So I appreciate that as well. I think as an entrepreneur, it's really important to take the viewpoint that things that happen to you don't actually happen to you, they happen for you. So that's the perspective that I took.
The uncertainty and the things that crop up and trip us up are, without a doubt, blessings and gifts from God. I think it's very difficult. Not very difficult, but it is difficult to maintain that perspective in the moment, particularly the longer they last. But as you progress through life, eventually you'll look back and you'll say, "There's no way I made it here without those things." And so, how can I, in the future, as these disruptions and blips on the radar interfere with the best laid plans of mice and men, How can I begin to cooperate with those things rather than be sullen or bitter or angry or why me, right? And one of the ways that I think you can do that, travel is a great way. Um, and also, you mentioned not just the fact that you traveled, but where you traveled and who you traveled with. And so for me, that has been in working with Jason, uh, it has elevated the conversations that I have about writing, about books, about publishing, to the point that yesterday I decided, it's been a while since I've uh, updated my LinkedIn profile. And the way that I had all the sections filled out, and I had a lot of detail on it, I said, you know what, this is really not, this was suitable for me back in 2021. It's not suitable for me anymore. And I had to redo it. But I was not at a mystery of what to say or how to say it because of all the conversations that we've had and the people that we've worked with and how that's elevated the conversation. So it's, a great deal of this is exactly what you say there, Ryan. You take yourself out of the normal way of doing things with the right people. And in many cases, yes, the right background and ambiance and setting is important too, because as much as we might like to think that we are creatures who can triumph through sheer willpower and our own force of personality, at the end of the day, no, that's not true. It's not entirely true. We're certainly products of our environment as well. We're certainly influenced by factors around us, which ought to be manifestly obvious when you look at the behavior of little children, right? They do what they see their parents and their peers and their teachers doing. They don't just organically start doing whatever they do. They do it in response to, and in many cases, in imitation of their environment.
Yeah, I think it was really important to get real quick. I think it was just really important to kind of take it all in for what it was and take the opportunities to grow and address different things that maybe I wasn't thinking about then. It really took me outside the box with regards to my project, my business, my situation, and gave me a chance to kind of look at it from a third person point of view. You know what they say, if you're playing a chess game versus watching one, you can see those different opportunities there. So I was really thankful to go on this trip and to be with the people I was with. I was very fortunate, and regardless of how I felt at the time, whatever triumphs and lows I was going through on this ship, because there was a bunch of things happening. It was super exciting. I have to say that it really helped me get more perspective as to what I was doing. So I saw a comedian Saturday night. I haven't been to a comedy club in a long time. First time I've ever been to a comedy club and sat in the front row. And, one guy that was walking in, we got like, "Hey, you're sitting in the front row. You're going to get picked on or whatever." I was like, "That's fine. I'm down." And as the first comedian came up on stage, who was the host for the night, you could tell she was very new. She's just cutting her teeth on this whole thing, searching for her jokes, not sure what to say. There's no crowd feedback. You could feel in the air this awkward silence of like, this isn't quite funny. Maybe you'll be a great comedian in the future. I don't know. But she was struggling in part because there was very little feedback from the audience. Second comedian got up there. He's a bit more polished. He knew his material. He was moving on one joke after another, but you could tell that he was giving a bit of a monologue. This was not a conversation with this crowd. Then the headliner for the night came up. You could tell he was very polished. I'm certain he was doing jokes, but they were also just worked in with a conversation with people from the audience. And there were times when he was searching for a bit of feedback, but most of the time the feedback was just natural. And there's a great book called The Power of the Other. I forget who writes it, but it talks about the choice of who we surround ourselves with is super important because there are people who are additive to our environment who give us feedback, and we then become better. We become more engaged. We become excited about whatever the product, service, or message is that we're delivering. And then there are people around us who don't understand where we're at, and they bring us down. It's this awkward silence in the air where we're just like, I'm not certain where this is headed. And all of a sudden people are searching like, am I really working on something important? Is this really going to happen? Does anybody care? And all of a sudden we have the energy drained, whereas before we were focused. We were meeting with that person. Man, that feels like everything's on fire here. It's very additive versus very draining. And so I think that circling this back around onto to travel and getting outside of our comfort zone, I think it's super important that we not only do that from an environment standpoint, but like we're talking about, choose the people that you go with, choose the people that you surround yourself with, because they are either adding and concentrating your efforts and making them better, and you can feel that energy, or they're taking away from it and you're trying to overcome the energy drain. And if you have a product, service, or message that's going to change the world, you want that to be concentrated and additive. And sometimes that means you're going to have to leave people that are not bringing you forward into that environment. They're not helping you create the environment that's necessary for you to achieve your goals.
I was talking to my sister the other day about almost this very thing. I think I was talking to her about time budgeting and energy budgeting, because I mean you budget everything, right? You budget your time, you budget your checkbook, you budget everything, right? And I think there are certain things in our lives where we have to kind of pick and choose who we are around, because we have to budget our energy. We have to budget it. If we're going to be successful in our relationships, in our business, in whatever it is, we have to budget. Um, and sometimes, like what you were saying, Jason, like when people are having that draining effect, that power of the other, like some people are that positive, they add that tumultuousness that you need in order to grow. But other people, instead of adding tumultuousness, they add this kind of leeching energy, where they kind of, instead of being understanding or like pushing you to be better, they're literally, it's, your energy is being sucked. It's like a vacuum situation. And you have to be so sensitive to that, because if you're not, like, traveling is one thing, right? Where it like kind of takes you out of your comfort zone and you grow when you're out there, when you're experiencing new things, that forces you to grow. But if there's something that has become stagnant, but is also like taking your budget, it's like if you don't tell your money, if you don't tell your money what to do, what you'll do will be dictated by your money. It's like that. Like your energy will be sucked by things or people that don't deserve it if you don't tell your energy where to go. And I think this conversation that I had with my sister is, there's some specific situations where I'm like, I don't give my energy to that. And it's like, and I have to be very calculated in how I approach this particular relationship or situation, and react a very specific way, calculated. And she was like, "Oh, that's so sad that that's how that is." I'm like, "Well, I'm not numb necessarily. It's budgeting. It's energy budgeting. Because if I don't give energy to this, then I can give energy to my kids. Because I can't let something suck the energy from me. If I budget and I give it exact amount that it will not become a suction for me, then then I'll be able to budget it and give it to where it needs to be. And I think in business, in travel, like we need to be very mindful of those things that become that leech, that take the energy from us. Instead of us budgeting, if it starts taking our energy without our permission, without our consent, without our knowing and we're like realizing we're depleted, we need to reassess and budget our energy accordingly. So that way we can put our energy in places that it will be most beneficial down the road, whether it's relationships, whether it's our business. But that's the biggest thing that came to my mind when Jason was just talking is budgeting energy. I think is such a huge thing for me, at least right now, is what I've been kind of contemplating.
Was that was good, actually. You know, I was so I have a saying, there's some people who are for what you're for. There's some people who are against what you're against, and there's some people who are just for you, period. Right? So let me unpack that. So you may have a business relationship where you and your business partner believe in changing the world specifically through inspiring world peace, right? They're for what you for. So as long as both of you guys can operate in that capacity, they're all for you, right? But then something, maybe world peace happens and now you guys are stuck wondering, like, what do we do now? We have nothing in common. So we break apart, we start to detract from each other. And then you may have someone that's just mad, like, you know what? I'm broke, you're broke, let's start a business. Right. That happens. And so what winds up happening is, one of you guys' financial situation changes. There's still nothing left. There's no common in, right? But then when you talk about people who are for you, right? Like, I always say this about Jason. One of the things I really appreciate about our relationship is that it really doesn't matter what I tell Jason. He'll tell me the truth, right? He'll say, I remember one of our first meetings, he said, are you willing to believe that you're the problem? And I was like, no, I don't want to believe I'm the problem because I'm probably not the problem. But in my heart, right? But, in my countenance, it just came over me to the point where it just brought me to tears because I knew he was right. And so some people are for you. Some people are against what you're against, right? The common enemy. And then some people are just for you. And Naomi, I think what you were speaking to is the fact that you don't want to give your energy to someone that is draining. Most likely what I'm saying is that person is probably not necessarily for you, right? There's something that changed in the relationship and it's manifesting itself, right? And so I think I'm real careful as well. I always tell people I've never lost a business partner that I regret. And not saying that I was, at fault or they were at fault. I've just always known that when you somehow God knows, and what I believe is that somehow God understands that you have to shut doors for other ones to open, right? And that's on both sides, right? Doors open both ways, right? You can either walk through it or you can walk out. And so I think that sometimes when doors shut and you feel puffed up, like, oh yeah, I'm glad that God took this person out of my life. They were draining my energy. In reality, on the other side of that, God's speaking to that person as well. You're not, don't take yourself so serious, right? There's something going on with that person as well. So that was good. Great information, Naomi. Jason, I don't know how we got to this topic. You pulled us in here, but that was definitely time.
What to circle this all back, right? We used the occasion from Ryan traveling to a physical location. But of course, anytime you travel to another physical location different from yourself, you have to remember you're also traveling to a different spiritual location. Particularly the further away you get from your what is most familiar to you. And so, over the weekend, I went to 30 minutes from my house to a place called the Lost Dutchman State Park, which is another one of these great trails with gigantic boulder size mountain formations that Arizona is really well known for. And it was definitely a different physical location. It's also a different spiritual location. It's an open desert. The only other people who are out there are hikers and enthusiasts for outdoors. But what it did to us in the spiritual is it took us out of our environment. It took all of the normal things that we would focus on or care about away, and you extrapolate it from there. The further you get away from either physically from where you spend most of your time, or spiritually in terms of the company that you're surrounded by when you get there, the more the neuroplasticity begins to kick in, and you are able to absorb new information, learn new ways of thinking, develop new ways of thinking. And so I think we set it off with travel, but I think what this is really exposing is that there's more than one way to travel. It's not just hop on a plane or a train or a car or any moving vehicle or even your own 2 feet. In many cases, it's about changing the environment that you're in one way or another and forcing yourself to move into something that is a little bit less familiar, there's a little bit more uncertainty and vagueness, and things are not clearly defined. That's certainly been my experience, for Jason and I working on Emissary has been, at first we didn't even know what we were thinking of working on. We just said, there's potential here, let's keep exploring it. And then eventually it crystallized. But you have to be willing to sit through a degree of unfamiliarity, vagueness, not really sure what's going to happen here, don't know where this is going, don't know if it's the road to, a brighter future, or could be a road to nowhere. The only way to do it is to walk down the path. And anyway, I would just say that travel is a great physical, tangible, accessible way of doing that. But over time, what you should realize is that even if you don't travel more than 30 minutes to an hour away from where you live, there's a vast ocean of thoughts, attitudes, behaviors, habits, etc. out there that you just don't have access to because our point of view tends to be so myopic.
So a decade ago, I spent some time doing team building at the local YMCA camp. And one of the things I learned during this time was that when you want to introduce people to, or when you want to inspire people to change, to learn, you have to get them to a point of discomfort. Because we work in these sort of concentric circles. There's the inner circle, which is our comfort zone. It's like we talked about habits, routines. It's the things we're doing every day. Like there's nothing new here. We're fine. We're also not learning. You do not learn things in your comfort zone. Everything is fine. You've got a grasp on it. The next concentric circle right outside the comfort zone is the learning zone. It is inherently uncomfortable to be in a learning zone. However, your brain's ready to absorb new information because you're being stretched outside your comfort zone into your learning zone. You're sort of priming the pump to, like you talk about, for neuroplasticity, your brain making new connections. But it is inherently uncomfortable. Outside the learning zone is the terror zone. And one of the keys that they teach when you're going to be the team building facilitator is push people into their learning zone, but keep them out of their terror zone. Because the terror zone is when everything freezes up. That's your fight, flight, or freeze or fawn mechanism. So if you're going to take somebody on a high ropes course, one of the things we talk about is you choose your own adventure today. We're going to take you on the high ropes course. If you want to stand at the bottom for 10 minutes while you're looking up there before you climb the pole, you can do that. If you want to stand there hugging the pole, you can do that. If you want to challenge yourself today and move out onto this high ropes course, you can do that because you know how uncomfortable you are before you get to or how uncomfortable you can be before you get to that terror zone. So you're already stretched outside your comfort zone into your learning zone, but keep the person out of their terror zone where they're going to freeze up, because now you're not learning things. Now you're frozen. Now you're stuck. And now you're likely going to, if you're in your terror zone, you're likely going to pull away from the new experience, which you don't want to do. You want to keep people in their learning zone. Now, one of the things I've been cognizant of for myself, and I think this is a lesson for every entrepreneur or any person for that matter, figure out where that learning zone ends and continue to stretch yourself into your learning zone. So get yourself out of your comfort zone when you feel like you're stuck, stagnant, not moving, not around the right, quote unquote, right people. Push yourself into a new experience, into your learning zone, and let that magic just sort of happen, because it will happen. And then when you feel like you're butting up against your terror zone, or if you feel like maybe you haven't butted up against your terror zone, that might be a better way to think about it. You feel like you've not pushed into your terror zone in a long time, stretch the boundaries of your learning zone. Push yourself further out in those concentric circles to the point where you're like, oh man, I might be freaking out here. That's fine. Back off just a little bit from there and stay in that learning zone. If you haven't felt that for a long time, I would encourage people to go out and do that, whether that's travel like you, Ryan, or whether it's inviting new people, new experiences, going to a new event, going to a comedy club, sitting in the front row. Why the heck not?
I love that. I have been kind of navigating comfort zone versus, okay, what was the word again? Comfort zone versus the freeze up zone.
Comfort, learning, and terror.
Learning and terror. I have a son who is on the spectrum, and we're navigating this. How much can I, like, we have to set specific boundaries, but there is a very, very, very fine line between comfort and terror, like the learning zone and terror zone. And I have had to be very, very cautious, because if we get into the terror zone, it's explosion of emotion. And then there's calming him down and helping him learn how to calm himself down. And so while you were talking just now, Jason, I kind of realized I haven't really explored those for myself. And so that's something that I really love that. I don't think I've really worked on finding my own learning zone versus terror zone and figuring out where that line is for me. And because I like to push myself. I mean, this last week, I mean, as you know, I've been pushing myself with some some technology stuff that I've never explored before. It was like learning a new language by immersion, and it was wild. And I feel so good with it now. I mean, still like I don't know everything, but I feel steadier because I really like to push myself. I love puzzles. I love figuring shit out. Like I love it. But the thing is, like, I don't think I'd ever really pushed myself, like learning the learning zone versus terror zone. But sometimes I don't know if I've ever gotten to know my learning zone versus terror zone, but I really, really love how when we take God as our companion in whatever we do, the terror zone sometimes can become the learning zone. If we know that we are doing what God needs us to do and being where God needs us to be, that terror zone, he's like, go anyway, and he is our wings. And it's like, it can be this huge learning that teaches us how to trust in him and his will more. So I don't know. I the fact that I hadn't really explored that, but then also the fact where sometimes that can be that if you're acting in faith and acting with God's will.
Well, I think people confuse the idea of discomfort with
Yeah.
terror. We become so comfortable as a society, and who wants to be uncomfortable anyhow.
Right.
But when we understand that discomfort does not mean wrong place, discomfort does not mean, oops, I'm, terrified. You're just uncomfortable. That's fine.
Mhm.
Be uncomfortable. That might be the best thing for us all. We do have, I think we got one more minute here. We need to close this up here because we spend an hour every Tuesday on the workshop. And we had Ryan here today, and he's got to jump off for call. Paul, Paul's got to jump off, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Any final words you guys want to close us out with? And by the way, welcome, TC. I'm really happy that you're here. And meet Naomi, TC, Naomi.
Hi.
Any other thoughts that you remaining faculty members on this call want to leave us with?
Yeah. So I love the fact that we've learned that travel is not just physical, right? But I think it's also very much a mental and spiritual journey. And the illustration that you gave us about the learning zone, the terror zone, direct reflection of Exodus to me. We're traveling, we're wandering, ambiguity, no sense of clarity, but we have a vision, right? We're moving past that learning zone now. Hey, man, it's not cool. I'm in my terror zone now. I'm going to turn around and just go back. But unfortunately, sometimes there's not enough manna to take you back home. Sometimes you have to go into discomfort zone, and God will then expand your learning zone. So your boundaries keep getting moved forward. You'll never make it to terror zone if you just go through the discomfort that it takes sometimes. I think a lot of times people will never make it to terror zone. They can just trust and have faith that their boundaries will be. So if you're dealing with that, definitely this is a space to talk through those things. I think joining the Thinker Growth community is amazing. Just thank you for this opportunity, Jason. Naomi, it's great to meet you.
You as well.
Awesome. Well, time to sign off. This has been the workshop. Happens every Tuesday here in the Thinker Growth community, where we work with faith-based founders to help them change the world. If you got a product, service, or method you believe is going to change the world, you owe it to the world. Get good at delivering it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Faculty members, thanks so much. I appreciate you guys. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you, Jace. See you, TC.